I never thought my womb, or rather its emptiness, would become the reason my family sold me. In our pack, a woman's worth was measured by the life she could bring forth. But I was barren, broken, useless. The night it happened, I sat in the corner of our dimly lit hut, listening as my father bargained away my life as though I were nothing more than livestock. "She cannot give us heirs," he told the man cloaked in shadows. "But perhaps your Alpha will find some use for her. Strong bones, a steady hand. She will not wither easily." My heart pounded in my chest when I realized who the buyer was. The Alpha of the Blood Moon Pack, feared across territories for his ruthlessness, had sent his beta to take me away. They called him Alpha Kale, a man who never smiled, who carried war in his eyes and shadows in his breath. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my mother's silence cut deeper than any blade. She did not even look at me. She just stood with her hands clasped, as though she had already buried me in her heart. When Beta's hand clamped around my arm and pulled me into the cold night, I realized the truth. I was no longer a daughter of my pack. I was property. And I was being sold to an Alpha who had no need for love, only power. Yet deep inside me, something whispered, my story was not ending. It was just beginning. The journey to the Blood Moon Pack felt endless. The beta rode ahead on his massive black horse, while I sat in a small carriage with nothing but the clothes on my back. Every jolt of the wheels against the rough earth reminded me how far I was being dragged from everything I knew. When the gates of the Blood Moon territory loomed before me, my stomach twisted. Iron and stone rose high against the night, lit by torches that flickered in the cold wind. Warriors lined the entrance, their eyes sharp, their posture stiff. I had heard stories of them, killers trained from youth, loyal only to their Alpha. The carriage halted, and the beta yanked the door open. "Out," he ordered, his tone void of emotion. I stepped onto the cobblestones, my knees trembling beneath me. Every gaze burned into my skin, stripping me bare. I had never felt so small. Then he appeared, Alpha Kyle. He stood at the top of the stone steps, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence commanding silence. His dark hair brushed against his jaw, his eyes, cold silver, seemed to pierce straight into my soul. I had heard whispers of his cruelty, how he had once ripped a rival's throat out with his bare hands, and now those same hands would hold my fate. "Bring her," he said, his voice deep and steady, carrying authority that made even the air feel heavy. The beta shoved me forward until I stood at the bottom of the steps. My heart hammered so loud I was certain everyone could hear it. Kale's gaze swept over me once, slow and assessing. "So," he murmured, his voice almost bored, "the barren daughter they sold me." The word barren cut like a blade, but I lifted my chin, refusing to let him see the weakness in my eyes. "I will not beg," I whispered, though my voice shook. One corner of his mouth curved, not into a smile, but something darker. "Good," he said. "I do not keep beggars." He turned then, striding into the fortress without another word. The beta motioned for me to follow. As I stepped into the cold stone halls, a realization settled into my bones. I did not belong to myself anymore. I belonged to the Alpha. But even then, a spark of defiance flickered inside me. He might own my body, but my soul would not bend so easily. The Blood Moon Fortress was unlike anything I had ever seen. Stone walls stretched high above me, carved with ancient runes that seemed to hum with power. The halls were lit by braziers, their flames casting long, shifting shadows that made the place feel alive. Servants and guards moved quickly, their eyes avoiding mine as though I carried some invisible plague. The beta led me into a chamber and shut the heavy wooden door behind me. The lock clicked, sealing me in. The room was vast, draped in furs and deep crimson cloths. A fire roared in the hearth, filling the air with the sharp scent of pine. At the center stood a massive bed, far too large for one person, yet everything about it screamed of dominance and possession. I stood frozen until his voice cut through the silence. "Do you fear me?" I turned, startled. He was there, leaning against the stone arch as though he had been waiting. Alpha Kale. His silver eyes glimmered in the firelight, sharp and unyielding. I swallowed hard. Should I? The faintest flicker crossed his face, something unreadable. He pushed away from the wall and strode closer, his presence so powerful I felt it before he even reached me. "They told me you were Barren," he said, his words deliberate, his tone cold. "That means you are useless to most men, but not to me." Anger pricked my skin. I am not a tool to be used. His gaze darkened, but instead of fury, I caught something else, a dangerous amusement. He stepped so close that the heat of his body pressed against the space between us. "You will learn, little wolf," he murmured, his breath brushing my ear, "that in my house I decide what you are." I clenched my fists, fighting the tremor in my hands, "and you will learn that I am not as weak as you think." For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. Then, to my surprise, he chuckled. The sound was low, rough, and it made my heart trip in my chest. "You have spirit," he said finally. "Good. Perhaps you will last longer than the others." My blood chilled. "The others?" I wanted to ask, but his hand suddenly lifted, just for a second, as if he would touch me. Instead, he pulled back, leaving me trembling with a confusion I could not name. "You sleep here," he ordered, his tone final, "and you will obey my rules. Cross me, and you will regret it." With that, he turned and left, the door slamming shut behind him. I stood there in the silence, breathing hard, my body alive with fear and defiance. I didn't know what he meant by the others. I didn't know why he chose to keep me when I was barren. But I knew one thing. Alpha Kyle was more dangerous than I had ever imagined. And whether I wanted it or not, my fate was now tied to his. When I woke, the fire had died down to smoldering embers. My body ached from lying stiff on the edge of the bed, as though even in sleep I feared taking up too much space. The heavy door creaked open. A young servant girl entered, her head bowed so low I could barely see her face beneath the curtain of dark hair. She carried a basin of water and a tray of bread and dried meat. "Good morning, mistress," she whispered, though her voice trembled as if the words themselves might earn punishment. Mistress. The word felt wrong in my ears. I was no mistress, only a captive with a gilded collar no one could see. "What is your name?" I asked gently. Her eyes widened in alarm, and she shook her head quickly. "I cannot say, mistress. The Alpha forbids us from—" She stopped, biting her lip. "The Alpha forbids us." I wanted to press her, to ask what sort of rules Kale had caged them in, but the girl bowed again and fled before I could speak. Left alone, I tore a piece of bread with my teeth, though my stomach churned too much to eat. I couldn't stop thinking about what Kale had said the night before. "You will last longer than the others." Others. What others? The door opened again, and this time it was him. Alpha Kale strode in, dressed in black leather armor that hugged his powerful frame. His silver eyes flicked to the untouched tray of food. "You refuse to eat?" His tone was calm, but beneath it I sensed a dangerous edge. "I am not hungry," I answered truthfully. "You will need your strength," he said flatly. "For what?" I demanded. "To be paraded as your possession? To remind me every day of what I cannot give you?" His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he only stared at me, as though weighing whether to lash out with words or action. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. "You think I bought you for heirs?" His voice was low, carrying an intensity that made the hairs on my neck rise. I faltered, Why else would an alpha take a barren woman? Something flickered in his eyes, something sharp, almost painful, before it vanished behind the wall of his cold composure. You will learn in time, he said, turning toward the door. But hear me well. This fortress holds secrets that could swallow you whole. If you value your life, do not wander without permission. His words were not a warning. They were a promise. The door shut, leaving me alone again, my mind spinning. If not for heirs, then why had he taken me? And what secrets could possibly be so dangerous that even an alpha feared them spoken aloud? One thing was certain. I was not just a prisoner here. I was a piece in a game I did not yet understand. And Kyle was not the kind of man who played games he could lose. Hours passed in suffocating silence. I paced the chamber like a caged animal, every word Kale had spoken gnawing at my thoughts. Do not wander without permission. But I had never been good at obedience. When night fell and the guard's footsteps outside my door faded, I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Slowly, I pushed. It creaked, but to my surprise, the door was not locked. I stepped into the corridor, my breath shallow, my bare feet whispering against the cold stone floor. The torches burned low, throwing jagged shadows across the walls. Something pulled me deeper into the fortress, past doors barred with iron and staircases that twisted into darkness. Then I heard it. Faint voices, hushed and urgent. I crept closer, my heart hammering. At the end of the hall, a heavy wooden door was left slightly ajar. Through the gap, I saw Kale. He stood with his beta and another man cloaked in black. The firelight flickered across his sharp features, casting his silver eyes into something almost feral. She cannot know, the cloaked man hissed. If she learns what you keep here? She will not, Kale interrupted, his voice like steel. No one survives long enough to speak of it. My blood froze. The cloaked man stepped closer. And if she does? For the first time, I saw something shift in Kale's expression. Not fear, he didn't strike me as a man who feared anything, but a shadow, heavy and dangerous. Then I will deal with her myself, he said. The words cut through me like ice. My hands trembled against the stone, but I forced myself to stay silent, stay hidden. Then suddenly, his head lifted. His silver eyes turned directly toward the crack in the door. He knew. I spun and ran. My feet flew across the stone floor, breath ragged, heart clawing against my ribs. Behind me, I swore I heard the door slam open, heavy boots pounding after me. By the time I stumbled back into my chamber, I collapsed against the bed, gasping for air. Moments later, the door burst open. Kale filled the doorway, his chest rising and falling, his eyes glowing like molten silver. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a slow, deliberate finality. You disobeyed me, he said softly, though his voice carried the weight of thunder. I forced myself to meet his gaze, though terror licked through me like fire. If you expect me to stay caged, then tell me why. Tell me what you're hiding in this fortress. He moved closer, and though anger radiated off him, there was something else in his eyes, a war he was fighting inside himself. Careful, little wolf, he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. You are treading in shadows that even I can barely control. He stopped inches away, his breath brushing my skin. His hand lifted, not rough this time, but slow, deliberate. His fingers brushed beneath my chin, tilting my face toward his. You want answers? His eyes burned into mine. Then survive long enough to earn them. And just like that, he released me and stormed out, leaving me trembling with more questions than before. Sleep refused to claim me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those silver eyes burning with fury and something else I could not name. His words echoed in my mind. Survive long enough to earn them. Survive what? The answer came with the night itself. somewhere deep beneath the fortress, a sound rose. A low, guttural growl that did not belong to any wolf I had ever heard. My blood turned cold. It was followed by a scream, not a cry of battle, not a warrior's death, but the sharp, tearing scream of someone being broken. I shot up from the bed, my heart slamming against my ribs. The sound carried through the walls, reverberating as if the stone itself wanted to warn me. Then silence. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping too loudly. No one else stirred in the corridor outside. The guards remained still, their shadows unwavering, which meant one thing: they heard it too, and they were trained to ignore it. Morning came slowly, dragging its pale light across the fortress. A servant entered with my food, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the tray. "You heard it too," I whispered. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. She shook her head frantically. "No, mistress. No. You must not speak of it. You must never speak of it." Before I could press her, she fled, nearly tripping over herself in her haste to leave. I sat frozen until the door opened again. This time, it was Cale. He looked as he always did, composed, cold, untouchable. But I noticed the faint streak of blood along his collar, half hidden beneath the leather of his armor. He followed my gaze and said nothing. "What is beneath this fortress?" I asked quietly. For a moment he didn't answer. His silver eyes studied me as though weighing how much truth I could bear. Finally he stepped closer, his shadow swallowing me whole. "There are monsters in this world, little wolf," he murmured. "Some are born. Some are made." His hand brushed the hilt of the blade at his side, his knuckles stained with dried crimson. "What you heard last night was both." I swallowed hard, my body trembling. "And you keep them here? Locked beneath your home?" Cale leaned in, his breath brushing my ear, his words low and sharp. "No," he whispered. "I am the one who keeps them." The weight of his confession pressed down on me like a stone. My mind reeled. If Kyle was not just alpha, but also keeper of something that screamed in the night, then what kind of bargain had I truly been sold into? And for the first time I wondered, had I been brought here as a prisoner, or as a sacrifice? I could not shake his words. I am the one who keeps them. The fortress walls seemed to breathe with secrets, every shadow watching me, every silence heavy with things unsaid. The scream from the night before still rang in my ears, haunting me. By the third night, my curiosity outweighed my fear. If I stayed ignorant, I would remain powerless. And Cale already had too much power over me. When the guards outside my door changed shifts, I slipped into the corridor, keeping to the edges where the torchlight didn't reach. I moved lower and lower, following the faint scent of blood and iron that grew stronger with every step. The staircases narrowed until they became more like tunnels carved out of the earth. The air grew damp, cold, and heavy with the metallic stench of death. Then I heard it, chains rattling, followed by a growl so deep it shook the walls. My pulse pounded, but still I crept forward, until I reached a barred gate at the end of the tunnel. Beyond it was a chamber carved into the rock, and inside, my breath caught. A creature crouched in the shadows, its massive frame straining against shackles bolted into the stone. Its fur was matted with blood, its claws sharper than any wolf's I had ever seen. Its eyes, gods, its eyes, burned a sickly, unnatural gold. Not wolf, not man. Something in between. Something wrong. It snapped its head toward me, and I froze. The chains rattled violently as it lunged, teeth bared, jaws wide enough to tear me apart, if not for the iron that held it back. I stumbled back, my heart clawing its way into my throat. The sound of boots behind me made me whirl around. Kyle stood there. His expression was carved from stone, but his silver eyes burned with fury. "I warned you not to come here." I shook my head, my voice trembling. "What is it? That thing?" He stepped closer, placing himself between me and the chained beast. "A monster," he said softly. "One of many. And you were a fool to think you could face it." It looked at me. I whispered, It knew me." At that, something flickered across his face, too quick to catch. He reached out suddenly, his hand closing around my wrist, his grip strong, but not cruel. "You will not come here again," he growled. "The things I keep down here would rip you apart before I could stop them." "And yet you keep them," I shot back, my voice breaking with fear and defiance. "Why? Why guard monsters instead of destroying them?" For a heartbeat, his mask slipped. I saw pain, raw, fleeting, before he shoved it deep again. "Because some monsters," he said, his voice low and bitter, "cannot be killed. They can only be chained." His grip tightened on my wrist, then loosened as though he regretted touching me at all. Without another word, he dragged me back up the winding stairs until the chamber vanished behind stone and silence. When he finally left me alone in my room, I collapsed against the wall, shaking. I had seen the darkness he kept caged, but the most terrifying part wasn't the beast in chains. It was the way Kale had looked at it, like he knew its hunger, like he understood it, like he was part of it. The image of the chained beast haunted me. Every time I blinked, I saw its burning eyes, its snapping jaws, its hunger for freedom. But more than that, I saw Kale's face when he spoke of it. Some monsters cannot be killed. The thought gnawed at me. Was he speaking of the creature or of himself? The following day, I was escorted to the Great Hall. For the first time, I saw Kale among his pack. Warriors knelt when he entered, their heads bowed low. His presence filled the vast chamber like a storm cloud, heavy and commanding. Yet when his gaze found me across the room, something flickered in his eyes, something sharp and unreadable. After the meeting ended, he summoned me to the balcony that overlooked the training grounds. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and steel. "You are reckless," he said, his voice calm but edged like a blade. I lifted my chin, refusing to cower. "And you are cruel for keeping me in ignorance. You cannot expect me to live in this fortress without knowing the dangers that lurk beneath it." His jaw clenched. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the mountains clawed at the sky. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, to my surprise, his voice softened. "Do you know why your family sold you to me?" he asked. I blinked. "Because I am barren, because I was useless to them." His silver eyes slid back to me, sharper than ever. "No, that was the excuse they gave you. The truth is far uglier." My heart stumbled. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, so close that the cold edge of his armor brushed my sleeve. "I chose you," he said quietly. "And your family agreed, because they feared what would happen if they refused me." The air left my lungs in a rush. "You chose me?" Kale's gaze hardened again, the softness gone in an instant. "Do not mistake this for kindness. I did not take you for heirs, nor for love. I took you because there are forces in this world that even an alpha cannot face alone." I stared at him, trembling. "And what am I to those forces?" For the briefest moment, pain flickered across his face, raw and unguarded. Then it was gone, shuttered behind his cold mask. "You will find out soon enough," he said, his voice low, final. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. Because in that fleeting crack in his armor, I saw something that terrified me more than the monsters in chains. Alpha Kale was not only my captor. He was a man carrying a burden so dark, so heavy, that even his strength could barely contain it. And for reasons I could not yet understand, he had bound me to it. The fortress grew colder with each passing night. Or maybe it was only me, my thoughts tangled in shadows, my dreams filled with the beast's golden eyes. But the worst was the sound. It came again, 3 nights later, the rattling of chains, the guttural growl that made the stone tremble. Only this time there was no scream. Only silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I pressed my ear to the door, but before I could move further, it opened on its own. Kyle stood there. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, silver lit from within like molten fire. His shirt clung to him, damp with sweat, and I saw it then. Fresh claw marks raked across his side, the blood still wet. I gasped. "You're hurt." He said nothing, only brushed past me into the chamber. His movements were slower than usual, heavier, as though every step cost him. I closed the door, heart pounding. "It was you, wasn't it? The sound, the chains. You weren't guarding the beast." He turned, his gaze locking onto mine. For once, he didn't hide behind silence. His voice came low, raw, edged with something like pain. "I am the beast." The words struck me like thunder. He moved closer, and in the firelight, I saw the truth. His pupils had thinned to slits, his teeth sharper than they should be. Power radiated from him, wild, untamed, dangerous. "My bloodline is cursed," he said, "half man, half wolf, and something else, a monster born of an ancient sin. Every alpha before me carried it, but I—" His jaw clenched, his fists tight. "I am the one strong enough to keep it chained." My breath caught in my throat. "Chained where? In the dungeons? Or inside you?" His silence was answer enough. The beast in chains, the monstrous thing I had seen, was not separate from him. It was him, or at least part of him, a part that broke free when the chains faltered. My mind reeled, but my voice came steady. "That's why you chose me." His eyes narrowed. "You think I don't see it?" I pressed, stepping closer despite the fire in his gaze. "You didn't take me because I could give you heirs. You took me because you believe I can survive you." For the first time his mask shattered. His face twisted, not with anger, but with something darker, something almost desperate. "You are not ready to know why," he growled, though his voice trembled under the weight of the truth he refused to speak. Then, as if the moment itself had become too dangerous, he turned from me, shoving the door open. But before leaving, he stopped, his voice rough, breaking against the walls. "Stay out of the dungeons, little wolf. If you see me there again—" He hesitated. "Run." The door slammed, and I was left trembling, my pulse a storm inside me. I had wanted answers. Now I had them. And the truth was far worse than I ever imagined. I couldn't sleep, not after what I had seen in his eyes, what I had heard in his voice. "I am the beast." The words gnawed at me like teeth. Hours passed, the fire burning low, until the silence broke. A faint scrape echoed outside my door, heavy boots dragging across stone. Then a muffled curse. I rushed to the door, heart pounding. When I opened it, Kyle was there. His broad frame leaned against the wall, his face pale beneath the torchlight. The claw marks across his side had torn open again, blood seeping through the leather of his armor. For the first time, he looked less like an untouchable alpha and more like a man fighting a war inside himself. Without thinking, I slipped beneath his arm and guided him inside. He didn't protest, though his body trembled with restrained power. "Sit," I ordered, surprising even myself with the command in my tone. He lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, breathing hard. His silver eyes watched me like a predator, wary, tense. But he didn't move when I tore strips from the linen sheet and pressed them against his wound. "You should have called for a healer," I whispered. "They fear me," he muttered. His voice was low, rough. "They all do." I pressed harder against the bleeding gash, forcing him to wince. "And do you want me to fear you too?" His gaze snapped to mine, sharp as a blade. "You should." But the words didn't match the way his shoulders slumped. the way his hand twitched as if he wanted to push me away but couldn't. "Fear doesn't stop me from seeing the truth," I said softly. "You bleed. You hurt. You chain yourself every night to protect them, even if they never see it." His jaw tightened, but something flickered in his eyes, a crack in the iron walls he had built. "You think me noble?" he asked bitterly. "Do not make that mistake. The beast inside me is not mercy. It is hunger, rage. One night it will break free, and when it does, it will not spare you." I swallowed, my hands trembling as I tied the linen around his wound. "Then I'll have to be strong enough to face it." Silence stretched between us, thick with something I couldn't name. His breath brushed my cheek, his scent, pine and steel and blood, wrapped around me. For a fleeting moment, I thought he might lean closer, that his lips might find mine, that the bond tugging between us might finally snap. But just as quickly, he pushed me away. Not roughly, but firmly. "Do not mistake my weakness for affection," he said, his voice hard again, though I heard the lie in it. "I keep you here for a reason, nothing more." He stood, towering over me, his wound hastily bound, his silver eyes a storm I couldn't read. And then he left, vanishing into the shadows, leaving me trembling with questions and a fire I could not put out. I pressed a hand to my chest, my heart racing. I had tended his wounds, but he had opened new ones in me, ones no bandage could ever heal. The fortress slept, but I could not. Ever since Cale had left my chamber, my mind raced with the weight of his words. One night it will break free, and when it does, it will not spare you. That night came sooner than I imagined. I woke to the sound of metal snapping, the deep, earth-rattling clatter of chains breaking one by one. Then, a roar. It was not human, not wolf. It was something that clawed its way into the marrow of my bones and shook me awake with terror. The guards outside my door shouted, their boots thundering down the corridor. Screams followed, flesh tearing, bones breaking. And then, silence. My breath hitched. I grabbed the iron poker from the hearth, the only weapon within reach. The door to my chamber slammed open, and for a heartbeat, I thought death had come for me. Kyle stood there, but it wasn't fully him. His chest heaved, his skin slick with sweat, his silver eyes burning brighter than the moon. His claws had already torn through his hands, his teeth glinting too sharp in the firelight. Veins bulged across his neck as if something inside him fought to claw its way out. "Run," he growled, his voice guttural, distorted, as though two beings spoke through the same throat. My grip tightened on the poker, though my legs shook. "No." His gaze snapped to mine, feral and unrecognizing for a moment. He staggered forward, claws raking the stone wall, leaving deep scars in it. His breath came in ragged snarls, his body trembling as the beast pressed against the cage of his skin. "Do not—" His voice cracked, twisted. "Do not stay, little wolf. I cannot hold it." I dropped the poker and stepped closer, ignoring the instinct screaming at me to flee. My hand lifted slowly, trembling as I placed it against his chest. His heart thundered beneath my palm, wild and uneven. "Then don't fight it alone," I whispered. For a heartbeat, his body stilled. His breathing slowed, though his claws still dug into the stone. His silver eyes locked onto mine, chaotic, furious, but tethered. I felt the tremor in his chest ease, as though my touch anchored him to something beyond rage, beyond hunger. With a guttural snarl, he tore himself away, stumbling back toward the hall. "Stay here!" he barked, though his voice cracked with more than command. It cracked with fear. Fear for me. Then he vanished into the shadows, leaving blood on the stones and silence in his wake. I collapsed to my knees, shaking. I had seen the beast trying to break him apart from the inside, and for a moment, I had touched it. The chamber door burst open just before dawn. Kale staggered inside, his skin pale, his shirt ripped and soaked with blood. His claws were gone, but his hands still shook, veins dark against his skin. He looked like a man who had waged war against himself and barely won. I jumped to my feet, heart pounding. Kale! Stay back, he snarled, though his voice cracked under its own weight. His body trembled, sweat dripping down his brow. He pressed a blood-stained hand against the wall, as though the ground itself might give way beneath him. You're hurt, I whispered, stepping closer despite his warning. Let me... I said stay back. His roar rattled the stone, his silver eyes blazing. But I didn't move. Instead, I reached for him, my fingers brushing his arm. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. Why? My voice shook with fear and desperation. Why keep me here, Kale? Why drag me into this nightmare? If I'm nothing to you, if I am only a burden, then why me? For a long moment, he said nothing. His chest heaved, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Then slowly, as though the words cost him everything, he whispered, "Because you are the only one who can quiet it." The air left my lungs. He finally lifted his gaze, and for the first time, I saw not the alpha, not the beast, but the man who had chained himself every night, who bore the weight of a curse older than both of us. The monster inside me. His voice cracked, raw and jagged. It does not listen, it does not bend. But when you touched me tonight... His hand twitched, curling into a fist. It stopped. It listened. I stared at him, trembling. You mean... I chose you, he said, his voice low and ragged. Because I felt it the first moment I saw you. Something in you calls to the beast. It does not crave you the way it craves blood. It yields. Only you. My heart thundered. So my family, they knew? His silence was answer enough. The betrayal cut deep, but the weight of Cole's confession pressed even deeper. He hadn't bought me for heirs, for obedience, or even for power. He had bought me to keep himself from becoming the very monster he feared. And though every instinct screamed at me to run, I knew the truth. I was already bound to him, not by chains, by something far more dangerous. I couldn't breathe after Kale's confession. You are the only one who can quiet it. The words spun in my chest like blades, cutting through every lie I had been told my entire life. When he left me that morning, I paced the chamber restlessly until the servant girl returned with water and bread. Her hands shook as always, but this time I grabbed her wrist before she could flee. Tell me the truth, I whispered fiercely. Why did my family give me to him? Was it really because I am barren? The girl froze, her eyes wide with fear. Mistress, please, I cannot. You can, I hissed, tightening my grip. Because I will not survive here blind. If you know something, tell me. Her lips trembled, her voice breaking into a whisper. Your family, they were approached long before the bargain. The Alpha's curse is no secret to those who rule. They knew he would come for you. My blood ran cold. They knew? She nodded quickly. It was not because you cannot bear children. It was because you were born with the mark. I frowned. What mark? The girl's hand lifted, trembling, and she brushed her fingers across the skin at the base of my neck. Here, beneath your skin, a trace of something that calls to the cursed. I do not know what it means, but your family feared it. They said you were touched by fate, that you would bring ruin if you stayed. So they gave you to him. My knees nearly buckled. My family hadn't sold me out of shame. They had sold me out of fear. And Kale had known. The girl tore herself free, her eyes wet. I should not have said this. Please, mistress, forget it. She fled before I could stop her, the tray clattering as she vanished into the hall. I stood frozen, my chest heaving, rage and grief twisting inside me. All those years believing I was worthless, broken, when in truth, I had been marked for something far darker. When Kale entered my chamber that night, his silver eyes searching mine, I could barely contain the storm inside me. "You knew," I whispered, my voice shaking with fury. His jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. "You let me believe it was because I was barren. You let me believe I was unwanted. All this time, you knew my family gave me to you because of this curse." His gaze softened for a fleeting moment. "Would you have preferred the truth? That they cast you out because they believed you were dangerous? That they thought you would doom them all?" Tears burned my eyes. Yes, because at least then I would have known who the real monsters were. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He took a step closer, but I stepped back, my chest trembling with betrayal. I had thought I hated Kale for buying me, but the truth cut deeper, because it meant the people who should have loved me had chosen to cast me into the jaws of the beast. And worse, I was beginning to wonder if maybe they were right. I couldn't stay. Not after the truth. My family had sold me not out of shame, but out of fear. Kyle had kept me in the dark, and now I knew I was nothing more than a key to a curse I didn't understand. That night, while the fortress slept, I wrapped myself in a cloak and slipped through the corridors. I had memorized the guards' shifts, the paths that led to the lower gates. My heart hammered with each shadow I passed. Freedom was only a breath away. But as I reached the eastern passage, a sound froze me in place. A roar. It split the night like thunder, shaking the stones beneath my feet. I knew that sound. I had heard it the night the chains broke. The beast. Shouts erupted from the guards above, panic rising like smoke. The fortress was awake now, but too late. The air grew thick with the stench of iron and blood. I turned a corner and stopped dead. There it stood. The beast towered over me, its eyes burning like molten silver, its body a mass of shadow and muscle, fur bristling like knives. Its chains dragged along the stone floor, shattered links still clinging to its limbs. Its jaws parted, revealing teeth longer than my forearm, and it was looking at me. Terror rooted me to the ground, but somewhere deep inside, another force stirred. That same strange pull I had felt when Kale lost control. The whisper in my blood, the tether between us. The beast lowered its head, snarling, claws scraping against the stone as it prepared to lunge. My body shook, but my voice came before I could stop it. "Stop!" The word echoed, sharper than I intended, thrumming with a power I didn't understand, and to my horror, it did. The beast froze mid-step, its chest heaving, its burning eyes locked on me. For a heartbeat, it looked almost confused. "Yield," I whispered, my voice trembling but strong. The beast let out a guttural snarl, shaking its massive head, as though fighting against something invisible. The ground cracked beneath its claws as it resisted, but it didn't strike. Behind me, I heard footsteps, fast and furious. Kyle's voice thundered through the hall. "Get away from it!" I turned, my chest heaving, as he sprinted toward me, his silver eyes wide with a fear I had never seen before. Not fear of the beast, fear for me. But I didn't move, because for the first time, I realized the truth. I wasn't just bound to Kyle. I was bound to the monster itself, and it listened to me. "Are you out of your mind?" Kale's roar cracked through the hall as he stormed toward me, silver eyes blazing with fury. The beast was still behind me, trembling, chained not by iron, but by something in me I could not name. I didn't move. My chest rose and fell in sharp, trembling breaths. "You told me to stop," I whispered, staring up at him. And it did. His hand shot out, grabbing my arm with a grip that burned. He pulled me away from the beast so violently I stumbled into his chest. "You should have run. Do you have any idea what it would have done to you?" "But it didn't," I said, voice breaking. "It listened." His jaw clenched, his teeth grinding. For a moment, he looked as though he might shake me until I broke. Instead, he shoved me back against the stone wall, caging me in with the weight of his body. "Do you think that is a gift?" His voice was low now, dangerous, the growl of both man and beast. "Do you think being able to command the monster makes you powerful?" Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't look away. "It makes me something. For once in my life, I'm not worthless." His face twisted, and I saw the war in him, the alpha, the man, the beast. He slammed his fist into the stone beside my head, the wall cracking under his strength. "You don't understand," he hissed. "That thing will never truly bow. It waits, it hungers, and if you stand in its path too often, it will turn on you. Do you hear me? It will devour you." I swallowed hard, my body trembling under the weight of his rage, but beneath it, beneath the terror, I saw something else flicker in his gaze. Not just fury, not just fear, desperation. "Why does it listen to me?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. His jaw tightened, his hand trembled where it braced the wall. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice low and ragged, he whispered, "Because you are the only thing it wants more than blood." The words hit me harder than his grip, harder than his roar. My chest tightened, my breath catching as I searched his face for any sign of a lie. But there was none. The beast wanted me. And that made me more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The silence after Kale's words pressed down on me like a weight. "Because you are the only thing it wants more than blood." I couldn't look away from him, though every instinct told me to run. His hand dropped from the wall, and he stepped back as though the truth itself had drained him. "You want answers?" he said finally, his voice low and rough. "Then you will have them, but once you know, there is no going back." "I crossed the point of no return the moment my family sold me to you," I whispered. His eyes darkened, but he nodded, resigned. "So be it." He turned and motioned for me to follow. I hesitated, glancing once at the beast, still trembling, still watching me with those molten eyes. Then I trailed Kale through the fortress, deeper than I had ever gone, down winding staircases carved into the mountain stone. At last, we came to a cavern lit by torches. On the far wall, etched in ancient, blood-dark runes, was a mural. It depicted a massive wolf, its jaws open wide, devouring the sun. Below it, men knelt in chains, their eyes hollow. Kale's voice echoed softly against the stone. "Long ago, before the first alphas ruled, there was a wolf born of shadow, a creature of endless hunger. The tribes called it Varrock, the devourer. No blade could kill it. No chain could bind it. So the shamans made a pact. They split its soul, binding half into the bloodline of kings and half into the bloodline of those destined to soothe it." My stomach twisted. "And you—" "I am the heir of kings," he said, his jaw tightening. "The beast is my curse to bear. Each alpha in my line carries it until it consumes him. None of us have lived past 40. I felt the blood drain from my face. "And me?" His eyes lifted to mine, silver and sharp as a blade. "You carry the other half, the blood of those meant to temper the beast. Your family hid it well, but they could not erase it. You were born to silence the devourer." The words struck me like a blow. My whole life, I had been told I was nothing, useless, broken, and yet here, in this cavern of fire and stone, I learned I was never empty at all. I was chosen, or cursed. "So that's why my family gave me to you," I whispered. "Not because I couldn't give them children, but because I was born to feed a monster." Kale's gaze softened for the briefest moment. "No, not feed it, chain it, control it. Without you, I would already be lost." A bitter laugh escaped me. "And with me? What am I, Kale? Your salvation, or your prison." He stepped closer, so near I could feel the heat of him, the raw power in his voice. "You are the only reason I still draw breath. Do not ever think you are nothing." His words seared into me, igniting something I didn't want to name. Because beneath the anger, beneath the fear, I felt it too. This pull, this tether between us that defied reason. And I hated that part of me didn't want to fight it. That night, sleep did not come easily. My mind replayed Kale's words over and over. "You were born to silence the devourer." I turned restlessly on the cold bed, but when sleep finally claimed me, it was no escape. I found myself standing in a forest bathed in silver light, the moon swollen and heavy above me. The trees stretched endlessly, their shadows long and claw-like. The air carried the scent of earth, iron, and something older, darker. And then I heard it, the low rumble of breath. I turned slowly. The beast emerged from the trees, massive and terrible, its silver eyes burning brighter than the moon itself. Chains dragged behind it, but in this place, they weren't broken or whole. They simply were, clinking faintly with each step. I should have run. My body screamed for me to flee, but I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the soil, my breath stolen. It stopped only a few feet from me, its head lowering until its snout hovered close. Hot breath washed over me, carrying the scent of smoke and blood. My voice trembled. "What are you?" Its gaze burned into me. And then, to my horror, I heard an answer. Not with my ears, but in the hollow of my chest. "Yours." I staggered back, shaking my head. "No, no, you're his curse, not mine." The beast growled, the sound vibrating through the marrow of my bones. Chains rattled as it stepped closer. "Mine," it echoed inside me. "And you are mine." The words coiled around me like bindings, heavier than iron. And though terror surged through me, something else flickered beneath it, a pull I could not deny, as though my very soul leaned toward its darkness. I lifted a trembling hand, and before I could stop myself, my fingers brushed its fur. It was warm, alive, and trembling like a storm beneath my touch. The chains rattled louder, straining. The beast pressed closer, its voice curling through me like smoke. "You cannot escape me, awake or asleep. I will always find you." My heart hammered. I opened my mouth to scream. And I woke, drenched in sweat, Kale standing over me, his silver eyes wide with something between fear and fury. "You were calling its name in your sleep," he growled. I froze. "Its name?" His expression hardened. "Varrock. You should not know it. No one has spoken it in centuries." But I had. The word had slipped from my lips in the dream like I had always known it. And deep down, I realized something that chilled me more than the beast's voice. It wasn't just Kale who was bound to Varrock. It was me. Kale's glare pinned me where I sat trembling on the bed. His voice was low, sharp, and final. "You will not sleep alone again." The words struck me harder than a command. My lips parted, but no protest came. My heart thudded wildly as the weight of what he said settled between us. I whispered, "Why?" His jaw flexed, silver eyes glittering like ice under moonlight. "Because when you sleep, the beast listens. If it answers you again, if it comes through you, this fortress will not stand come dawn." A shiver raced through me, though not all of it was fear. "And staying near you, that will stop it?" His silence stretched, his expression unreadable. Finally, he muttered, "It obeys me, but it craves you. Between us, perhaps it will stay caged." The way he said craves you set my blood burning, though I fought to keep my face steady. He turned, dragging a heavy chair closer to my bed, before lowering himself into it. His massive frame seemed out of place in the small chamber, like a storm contained within stone walls. "Sleep," he ordered. "I'll keep watch." But how was I supposed to sleep with him sitting there, his presence a shadow heavier than the beast itself? I curled under the blanket, but my eyes kept straying to him. He sat utterly still, broad shoulders rigid, silver gaze fixed on me like I was both his prisoner and his salvation. The room was silent save for the pounding of my own heart. At last, exhaustion dragged me under, but not into dreams of forests or chains. Instead, I drifted into warmth, as though his presence shielded me from the monster clawing at the edges of my soul. When I stirred awake, dawn light spilling across the chamber, Cale was no longer in the chair. My pulse spiked, until I realized he was lying at the edge of my bed, still awake, still watching me. Our eyes met in the pale light. For the first time, there was no fury in his gaze, only a raw, unspoken truth neither of us dared to voice. I sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from my shoulders. "You didn't sleep." His lips curved into something too sharp to be a smile. Alphas don't sleep when danger lurks. But I saw it then, the exhaustion in the hard line of his jaw, the faint shadow beneath his eyes. He hadn't closed them once all night. He had watched over me, guarding me from both beast and nightmare, and for a fleeting moment, I hated myself for how safe that made me feel. The silence between us stretched, heavy with everything unspoken. Kyle sat at the edge of the bed, his hand resting on his knee, the veins standing out starkly against his skin. I couldn't stop myself from asking, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you look at me like that?" His silver eyes snapped to mine, sharp as blades, but beneath the steel there was something else, something raw, restrained, hungry. "You want the truth?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. I nodded, though my heart raced. "Because every time I look at you, the beast inside me stirs. It claws at me, demanding I claim you. And every time you open those defiant eyes, I wonder if I want to fight it, or surrender." His words stole my breath. My pulse thundered in my ears, heat flooding through me. The air between us felt charged, as though the very walls leaned closer to listen. Slowly, his hand lifted from his knee, hovering in the space between us. I knew he shouldn't touch me. I knew I shouldn't want him to. But my body betrayed me, leaning ever so slightly forward, as though drawn to him by some invisible thread. His fingers brushed my jaw, light, almost hesitant. The touch seared me, burning hotter than any fire. I closed my eyes, my breath shuddering. For one stolen moment, there was no alpha, no curse, no beast, just us. But then Cale's hand jerked back as though scalded. He stood abruptly, his chest rising and falling hard, fury flashing in his eyes, though I knew it wasn't me he was angry with, but himself. "This cannot happen," he growled, voice rough, strained. "You are here to chain the beast, not tempt it." The words should have cut me. Instead, they left me hollow and aching. He turned toward the door, his shoulders rigid, his fists clenched. Just before he left, he spoke without looking back. "Stay out of my reach, little wolf, because if I touch you again, I won't stop." And then he was gone, leaving me trembling in the dawn light, my lips tingling with the ghost of the touch that almost was. That night, I tried to resist sleep. I told myself I would stay awake, that I wouldn't let Varric crawl back into my dreams. But exhaustion was cruel, and when my eyes closed, I found myself once more beneath the silver moon. The forest waited for me. So did he. Chains rattled softly as the beast stepped from the shadows. But this time, it didn't bare its teeth. Its silver eyes gleamed as though it already knew I wouldn't run. "You ache," it whispered inside me. "I feel it." My breath caught. I shook my head. "You're not real. You're just a shadow of him. A curse." The beast prowled closer, circling me like prey. Yet there was no hunger in its movements, only a terrible, deliberate patience. He denies you. He fears what he wants. I do not. When it stopped in front of me, its massive head lowered again, close enough that I felt its warmth. Slowly, impossibly, its form shifted. Chains melted into darkness, fur fading into shadow until what stood before me was not entirely beast, and not entirely Kale. A monstrous figure, broad and terrible, yet shaped like the man I could not stop thinking about. His eyes burned like silver fire, his voice curling inside me with the weight of 1,000 chains. "He says he will not touch you," Varric murmured, his voice low and darkly intimate. "But I already have." My chest tightened, heat flooding me at the sound of his words. "You're lying," I whispered. "You're just the darkness inside him." His shadow hand rose, brushing against my cheek. The touch was ice and flame at once, searing my skin and yet pulling me deeper. "And what is darkness, little one?" he asked. "If not the truest self?" I trembled, torn between pulling away and leaning into him. The chain at his throat rattled as though straining against some unseen anchor. "You cannot deny me. Even awake, you feel me. When his eyes linger, when his voice roughens." His silver gaze pinned me, hungry and knowing. "It is me he fights, and me you want." The words lodged in my chest, terrifying and irresistible. I opened my mouth to protest, and woke with a gasp, my body trembling, sweat clinging to my skin. Kyle was there, looming in the doorway, his silver eyes storm-dark, his nostrils flaring as though he could scent my dream. "What did you see?" he demanded, his voice hoarse, dangerous. I swallowed hard, unable to look away from him. My lips trembled with the truth I dared not say. "I saw you, and I wanted you." Kale's demand hung in the air like a blade at my throat. "What did you see?" His voice was rough, the words dragged from somewhere deep and dangerous. I opened my mouth, but the truth stuck fast in my chest. How could I tell him that I had seen Varric take his shape? That the beast had touched me in a way he never dared? That part of me hadn't pulled away? My throat tightened. I shook my head. It was nothing. Just shadows. His eyes narrowed, burning silver. "Do not lie to me." "I'm not," I whispered, clutching the blanket tighter around me. It was only a dream. For a long, breathless moment, he just stared at me. His chest rose and fell too quickly, the cords in his neck straining as if holding back something he didn't want to unleash. Then, slowly, he stepped closer to the bed. My heart stuttered with every measured stride until he loomed over me, a storm wrapped in skin. "You reek of him," Kale growled, his voice low, feral. "I can smell it clinging to you like smoke." A shiver swept through me. I shook my head, desperate. "I told you, it was nothing." His hand slammed against the headboard beside my face, caging me in. I gasped at the suddenness, my pulse hammering. His other hand hovered in the air, trembling as though he wanted, no, needed to touch me, but knew he shouldn't. "Do you think I don't know when he's touched what's mine?" His words were jagged, half alpha command, half something far more primal. I froze. My breath caught on that single word. Mine. He seemed to realize what he'd said, his jaw tightening as though he wanted to snatch it back. But he didn't. Instead, his eyes blazed brighter, his chest heaving. "Stay away from the dreams," he rasped. "If he reaches for you again, wake me. Do you understand?" I could only nod, though deep inside I knew it wasn't that simple. Because when Varric had reached for me, I hadn't wanted to wake. Kale lingered a moment longer, his heat sinking into me, his silver gaze searing every inch of my skin. Then he tore himself back, fists clenched, as if retreat was the only way to keep from breaking entirely. The door shut behind him, but I sat trembling in the silence, my heart heavy with the secret I couldn't speak. Because the beast wasn't wrong. Part of me wanted him. The next night, Kale didn't ask. He simply moved my blanket aside, dragged a heavy fur across the floor, and dropped it at the foot of my bed. "You're not sleeping alone," he said flatly. I blinked at him, startled. "You mean, you're going to stay in here?" His silver eyes cut to mine. "Until I'm sure the beast can't reach you without going through me first." Heat spread through me at his words, though I tried to mask it with defiance. "So now I'm your prisoner and your bedmate?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "No," he said, voice rough. "You're my responsibility." But the way he said it didn't sound like a duty. It sounded like a vow. He stretched out on the fur, his massive frame taking up most of the space. Even in rest, his presence filled the room. Every breath, every flicker of muscle under skin, reminded me I was sharing my chamber with a predator. For a long while, neither of us spoke. I lay rigid beneath the blanket, my back to him, trying to ignore the warmth that seeped into me simply from knowing he was there. His breathing was steady, deep, but not asleep. Never asleep. The silence grew too heavy. My voice slipped out before I could stop it. "You said I was yours." The stillness shattered. Behind me, I heard his breath catch, the faint creak of leather as his fist clenched. "That was a mistake," he said finally, his voice hoarse, strained. "You belong to no one." I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling, fighting the ache his denial sparked. But the beast thinks otherwise. "Varric craves everything he can't have," Kyle bit out. "Don't confuse his hunger with choice." "And you?" The question escaped before I could swallow it. My pulse raced in the silence that followed. "Do you want me, or is it only him?" The darkness seemed to thrum with his restrained fury, his breath coming harder now. When he finally answered, his words were low, ragged, torn from a man fighting both truth and control. "I want you in ways I shouldn't." The confession burned through me, leaving me breathless. I clutched the blanket tighter, afraid of what I might do if I reached for him now. Kyle didn't move closer. He stayed on the floor, as though the fur between us was the only wall strong enough to keep him from crossing a line neither of us could undo. But the bond had already shifted, and I knew, no matter how many furs he spread between us, no chain in the world could keep us apart forever. The fortress was quieter than usual that night. No shouts of training warriors, no boots striking the halls. Only the distant howl of the wind against the stone walls, carrying the promise of rain. I tried to sleep, but my mind was restless, replaying Kale's words over and over. "I want you in ways I shouldn't." It wasn't just Varric. It wasn't just the curse. It was him. I shifted under the blanket, accidentally brushing my hand against the splintered edge of the headboard. A sharp sting bit my skin. "Damn it," I hissed softly, pulling my hand back. A thin line of blood welled across my palm. The sound must have carried, because Kale was instantly at my side, rising from the fur like a shadow made flesh. His silver eyes locked on the cut, and his jaw hardened. "Why didn't you tell me this wood was broken?" His voice was low, threaded with quiet fury. Though not at me, I realized, but at the careless danger itself. "It's nothing," I whispered, embarrassed. He ignored me. His hand, calloused and strong, closed gently around mine. His touch was careful, deliberate, as though holding something fragile he had no right to break. Heat flooded me at the contact. My heart stuttered. He lifted my hand closer, inspecting the wound, his brow furrowed. The lamplight caught the sharp line of his cheekbones, the shadows of his lashes. For a moment, he didn't look like the ruthless alpha everyone feared. He looked like a man fighting demons I couldn't see. His thumb brushed my skin, slow and steady. "I could smell the blood before I saw it," he murmured. "You smell everything," I whispered back, my throat tight. His gaze flicked to mine then, and the world seemed to still. Silver locked onto me, piercing and raw. "Not everything," he said. "Not the things you keep buried." The air between us thickened, hot and fragile. His hand lingered far too long against mine, and for one heartbeat I thought he might close the distance, that the walls he built so carefully around himself would finally crack. But then he released me, stepping back with a sharp breath, as if he'd just held fire too long. "Sleep," he ordered, voice rough, breaking the moment before it broke him. I curled back under the blanket, my hand tingling where his touch had been. Sleep didn't come, but something else did, a certainty that the alpha who swore he wouldn't touch me already had. Not with his body, but with his heart. By morning, I thought Kale would retreat again, burying himself in distance and silence. But when the heavy doors of my chamber creaked open, it wasn't a servant who entered. It was him. His broad frame filled the doorway, his cloak draped over one shoulder, his silver gaze already fixed on me. "Get dressed," he said. I blinked at him. "Why?" "You'll be at my side today." His tone left no room for argument. My heart lurched. "Your pack will. Let them think what they want." His jaw flexed, steel in his eyes. "I won't leave you unguarded, not after last night." The words curled around me, equal parts command and protection. I swallowed the protest that rose in my throat and dressed quickly, every nerve alive with anticipation. When I stepped into the great hall with Kale, the air shifted immediately. Conversations faltered, eyes turned, whispers slithered like snakes through the gathered wolves. "She's Barren. Why does the alpha waste his time? Has the beast chosen her?" I kept my chin high, though my insides quaked. Kale's presence beside me was both shield and weight. His hand brushed my lower back once, guiding me through the crowd, and though the touch was fleeting, it set fire to my skin. At the council table, he didn't let me sit apart. Instead, he pulled a chair close, too close, so that when I lowered myself into it, our arms almost touched. Every elder noticed, every warrior stared. Kyle ignored them all. He spoke of patrols, of border threats, of supplies, his voice clipped and commanding as always. But his body was angled subtly toward me, his shoulder a constant reminder of the nearness I wasn't supposed to crave. At one point, an elder dared to speak. "Alpha, why do you keep her here? Shouldn't she remain apart, as tradition dictates?" The silence that followed was thick as a noose. Kale's gaze sharpened, lethal. "Tradition has never tamed a beast," he said coldly. "She stays where I say she stays." The elder swallowed and looked away. No one else spoke. I sat there, my heart pounding, realizing what his words meant. I wasn't a servant or a chained offering. Not anymore. I was something far more dangerous. And for the first time, I saw it in their eyes. They feared me, not for what I was, but for what I was becoming. Kales. The council meeting broke, but the air in the great hall remained sharp, charged with whispers and sidelong glares. I rose when Kyle did, ready to follow him out, when a low growl cut through the murmurs. "Alpha!" The voice came from one of the younger warriors, a broad-shouldered wolf with a scar down his cheek. He stepped forward, fists clenched, eyes flicking from me to Kale, with a mixture of disdain and challenge. "This isn't right," he said, his tone rough, reckless. "A Barren girl at your side? It dishonors the pack. She weakens you." The room went still. My breath caught, every muscle in my body taut. I had expected whispers. I had expected scorn. But not this. Never this. Kyle turned slowly, his presence darkening like a storm. His silver eyes locked on the insolent wolf. "Say that again," he ordered, his voice low and lethal. The warrior's jaw tightened. "She doesn't belong here. She doesn't belong with you." Gasps rippled through the hall, but no one moved to stop him. The pack watched, hungry for blood, eager to see how far their alpha would go. Kale descended the steps with terrifying calm, every stride radiating power. He stopped mere inches from the challenger, towering over him. "Do you question me?" Kale growled. "Or do you challenge her?" The warrior's throat bobbed, but pride forced him forward. "Both." I froze, my pulse screaming in my ears. He had challenged me. Me, someone who had no claws, no fangs, no way to fight back. Kyle's lips curved, not in a smile, but in something far more dangerous. "Then you'll learn," he whispered, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "that to touch her is to touch death itself." And before the warrior could draw breath, Kale struck. It was fast, too fast for my eyes to follow. One moment the wolf stood defiant, the next he was on his knees, Kale's hand locked around his throat, silver eyes glowing with a primal fire that wasn't entirely human. The beast was close. I could feel it pressing through him, straining against his control. The warrior gasped, clawing at Kale's grip, but Call didn't relent. His voice was a snarl, deep and guttural. "She is mine." The words echoed like thunder, shaking me to my core. Then, just as suddenly, Kale released him. The warrior collapsed, choking, scrambling back on hands and knees, his defiance broken. No one else dared to move. Kale didn't look at the pack. His gaze found me instead, sharp and unyielding, as if daring me to deny the claim he had just carved into the very bones of his people. And for the first time, I realized he hadn't just defended me. He had bound me to him in front of everyone. The hall emptied quickly after Kale's display. No one wanted to linger in the shadow of the beast still prowling beneath his skin. The warrior he had broken crawled away with his pride in tatters, and the rest of the pack scattered, their whispers cut short whenever Kale's gaze swept over them. I followed him in silence, my heart still pounding from what I had witnessed. He didn't look at me as we climbed the stairs to his private chambers. His steps were sharp, each one striking stone with restrained violence. When the heavy door closed behind us, the air thickened. Kale's back was to me, his shoulders heaving as though he carried the weight of the entire fortress. I swallowed hard. "You didn't have to do that." His head snapped slightly, silver eyes flashing. "Didn't I?" His voice was rough, like gravel dragged over steel. "He challenged you, before the entire pack. Do you know what that means?" My throat tightened. That he thought I was weak. Kyle turned then, closing the space between us in 2 long strides. His hand came up, not harsh, but firm, cupping my jaw as his eyes burned into mine. "No," he growled. "It means they thought you were unclaimed, and I will never allow that again." The word claimed sent a shiver racing through me, hot and cold at once. My lips parted, but no sound came. His thumb brushed along my cheekbone, a touch far too gentle for the fury he carried. "You don't understand," he said, softer now, though his voice still trembled with restraint. "I didn't plan to say it. I didn't plan to lose control. But when he looked at you, when he spoke your worth like it was less than nothing," his jaw tightened. I wanted to rip out his throat. My chest rose and fell too quickly. "Kale." He closed his eyes for a brief, tortured moment, his forehead nearly resting against mine, though he didn't quite let it touch. "I told myself I wouldn't touch you, that you were safer if I didn't. But I can't. Not anymore." The confession hung between us, heavy and dangerous. His breath mingled with mine, his hand still against my skin, holding me as if I might vanish. For one impossible heartbeat, I thought he would close the distance, that his lips would finally claim what his words had already branded. But then he pulled back sharply, his chest heaving. He released me, turning away as though his own control had burned him. "Go," he said hoarsely, "before I do something I can't take back." I stood frozen, my lips tingling with the kiss that hadn't happened, my heart screaming with the truth I couldn't ignore anymore. I wasn't just his captive. I wasn't just his protection. I was his weakness, and perhaps the only thing keeping the beast from swallowing him whole. That night, I couldn't escape the fire Kale had left smoldering in me. His hand on my jaw, his words, "You are mine." I lay restless beneath the furs, tossing between the pull of exhaustion and the chaos in my chest. When sleep finally dragged me under, it was not peaceful. The forest rose around me again, dark, endless, dripping with shadows. I knew this place too well, and I knew he would be here, the beast. My feet carried me through the trees, though I wasn't sure if I was running toward him or away. The air thickened, alive with a presence that pressed against my skin. Then I saw them, those eyes, silver fire, glowing in the darkness. My breath caught. "Kale?" A shape emerged from the trees, massive and terrifying. It was no wolf I had ever seen, no creature born of this world. His form rippled between man and monster, fur and flesh, fangs and lips. The beast's breath curled white into the night, yet when he stepped closer, I felt heat rolling off him like a furnace. I should have been afraid, terrified, but I wasn't. Not anymore. He lowered his massive head, and when his muzzle brushed against my hand, a strange calm filled me. My fingers sank into his fur, coarse, thick, alive with power. The moment I touched him, the forest stilled, the shadows retreating as though the beast's rage had been soothed. His silver eyes locked with mine, and for the first time, I felt no hunger, no threat, only a question. Why me? I opened my mouth to speak, but the dream shifted violently. The beast shuddered, his form rippling, breaking apart between man and monster. And then he wasn't a beast at all. He was Kale. On his knees before me, his head bowed, his chest rising with ragged breaths as though he was fighting not to collapse. His hands, those strong, steady hands that had crushed a warrior's pride hours before, clutched at the ground like chains bound him there. "Don't leave," he whispered, his voice raw. "You're the only thing keeping me human." I reached for him, but before my fingers touched his cheek, I woke. My breath tore from me, my skin damp with sweat, my heart racing like I had run for miles. Yet the strangest thing of all was the warmth still lingering on my palm, as if I had truly touched him in that dream, as if the beast had been real. Morning came too quickly, though my body felt as though it hadn't slept at all. My dreams still clung to me like cobwebs, and my palm tingled with phantom heat from where I had touched the beast, touched Kyle. I sat up slowly, pressing a hand to my chest, trying to steady the wild rhythm there. The chamber was quiet, save for the soft crackle of the dying fire. I thought I was alone, until I felt it, that gaze. I turned, and my breath caught. Kyle stood in the shadows near the window, his arms crossed over his chest, his silver eyes fixed on me with a weight that made my skin flush. He looked as though he hadn't moved all night, as though he had been standing there in silence, watching. My voice came out hoarse. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough." The words were quiet, but they carried something that tightened the air between us. I swallowed hard, clutching the blanket tighter around me. "You should sleep." I couldn't. His jaw shifted, the faintest muscle ticking there. Not when I felt... He cut himself off, his gaze darkening. I froze. Felt what? He took a slow step forward, his presence swallowing the space between us. His eyes never left mine. "You dreamed." The room tilted slightly, my breath faltering. "How do you know that?" His hand flexed at his side, like he was restraining himself from reaching for me. "Because I saw it too." My blood ran hot and cold all at once. "You... what?" Kale's eyes blazed, silver fire burning through every word. "I saw you. In the forest. I saw you touch me." His voice lowered, breaking with something raw. And for the first time, the beast was calm. The blanket slipped from my fingers, pulling at my waist. My lips parted, but no sound came. He closed the final distance, his hand rising, not rough, not demanding, but trembling with restraint as he brushed his knuckles along my cheek. "Whatever this is between us," he whispered, "it's stronger than fate, stronger than the curse, and it terrifies me." I leaned into his touch without meaning to, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Terrifies me too," I wanted to say, but the words caught in my throat, tangled in the fire building in the silence between us. For a heartbeat I thought he would close the gap, that the kiss I had dreamed of would finally become real. But then a sharp knock shattered the moment, echoing against the chamber door. Kyle's hand dropped instantly, his entire body tensing, eyes flashing with irritation as a voice called from the other side. "Alpha, there's been an attack." Kyle didn't hesitate. The moment the words "there's been an attack" pierced the air, he turned toward me, his hand gripping my wrist with a force that was protective, not cruel. "You're coming with me." I barely had time to grab my cloak before he pulled open the chamber door and led me down the winding stone halls. Warriors rushed past us, their eyes flicking to me with confusion, but none dared speak while Kale's shadow loomed over them. The night air hit like ice when we stepped outside. The courtyard was alive with chaos, wolves in their shifted forms growling low, warriors arming themselves with steel and silver, healers rushing to the injured. The snow was stained red in places, steaming where it met the cold. I stumbled as Kale pulled me forward, my heart hammering. "What happened?" "Scouts were ambushed," one of the betas barked as he joined us. His voice was sharp, urgent. "The rogues weren't alone this time. They had something else with them." Kale's jaw tightened. "Show me." We followed the trail of blood to the gates, where two bodies lay on the ground, covered with cloaks. The scent of iron and smoke was thick, choking, but it wasn't the bodies that made my stomach twist. It was the claw marks. Deep gouges tore through stone and steel, far too large for any wolf. I froze, my blood running cold. I had seen those marks before. Not here, not in this world, but in my dreams. The forest, the beast. Kale's hand tightened on mine, anchoring me as though he felt the tremor running through me. He crouched near the broken gates, his silver eyes scanning the damage. "This wasn't rogues," he muttered, almost to himself. "This was..." His gaze flicked to me suddenly, sharp and knowing, as though the truth had just brushed the edge of his mind. Before I could speak, a scream split the night. One of the warriors collapsed, his throat torn open by something too fast to see. The shadows themselves seemed to move, and from the tree line, a low, guttural growl rolled out, a sound that made every wolf in the courtyard bristle in fear. The same sound I had heard in my dreams. Kale pushed me behind him, his entire body shifting into lethal readiness. His voice was pure command when he spoke. "Stay close to me, no matter what happens." And then the beast stepped out of the shadows. The courtyard shook as the creature emerged from the tree line. It was colossal, horns curling like shadows of bone, fur black as midnight, silver eyes burning with hunger and torment. The very sight of it sent wolves scrambling back, warriors trembling. The beast. The one from my dreams. And Kale's body stiffened in a way that made my blood run cold. He didn't just know this monster. He was it. "Stay behind me," Kale growled, his voice already distorting, deepening as his claws lengthened. But when he launched forward, steel flashing in his hand, the beast didn't strike him. It struck me. I stumbled, screaming, only for Kale to intercept the blow, claws and fangs clashing against its shadowed ones. The pack roared in chaos, warriors swarming, but the beast fought like a storm unleashed, scattering them like leaves in the wind. And yet, through the terror, I felt it, the pull in my chest, the same tether from the dreams. My hand burned with that phantom warmth. I knew what I had to do. Ignoring Kale's order, I pushed through the chaos and stepped forward. The beast swung its massive head, silver fire locking onto me. "Look at me," I whispered, though my voice shook. "You know me, don't you?" For a heartbeat, the world stilled. The beast's growl faltered, its massive claws lowering. I lifted my hand, the same way I had in the dream, and touched its muzzle. Heat seared through me, but it didn't burn. Instead, it steadied me. The silver fire in its eyes softened, flickering. Behind the beast's form, I saw Kyle. On his knees, trembling, fighting something inside him. His lips formed the same words as in the dream. "You're the only thing keeping me human." And then it clicked. The beast wasn't Kale's enemy. It was Kale. The curse he bore, the monster he chained every day of his life. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed my forehead to the beast's. "You're not alone anymore." The beast shuddered, then burst into blinding silver light. When the light faded, Kale was kneeling before me, naked, trembling, but alive. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, his face buried in my neck, as though he would never let me go. "I should have destroyed you," he whispered hoarsely, "but you saved me." I cradled his face, forcing him to meet my tear-streaked eyes. "You were never meant to be destroyed. You were meant to be loved." Silence fell over the courtyard. The pack, who had feared the beast for years, now stared in stunned awe. Not one moved. Not one dared to challenge what had just happened. For I had done what no warrior, no spell, no alpha could do. I had tamed the beast. Or maybe I had simply reminded him he wasn't one. Kyle pressed his forehead to mine, his silver eyes shimmering not with rage, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. "You're mine," he whispered again, but this time it wasn't a command. It was a vow. And for the first time, I didn't flinch from it, because I knew the truth. I had been sold for being Barren, but fate had brought me here for a reason, not to give him heirs, but to give him peace. And in return, he gave me what I had never thought I deserved: love.